Fashua, the Chief Executive Officer at Global Analytics, is joining me right now. And I think he's also trying to enter the political, or he has entered already. Are you looking at me? But I don't want to discuss that politics side. Let's take a look at what's been happening in the economy. Good to see you. Welcome to the show.
Thanks
How are you?
for inviting me. Great.
How are you doing?
Yeah, not bad. Coping.
Okay.
Trying to survive the economic tides and so on. Yeah.
Now, let's take a look at Nigeria, 19 years of democracy so far. And people have actually argued that we need to celebrate, at least celebrate the essence that we are free from, I mentioned earlier, the khaki boys, the military people. Don't take it that way. They are khaki boys and they ruled us for a long time. And this is the longest that we've not seen a truncated democratic rule. What's your analysis about that before we go into other things?
Well, I think the whole idea of khaki men ruling anywhere in the world is actually quite expired and frowned upon by every right-thinking person in the world. And so it's not the standard, you know, and the fact that they're not here, I'm not sure is anything to celebrate. In fact, what we can see was, of course, they transmogrified into politicians. And they have shown as well that even as politicians, they're not that quite on the money. They are not that good in terms of administration, in terms of imagination, in terms of visioning, in terms of, you know, knowing what to do about the economy. In fact, someone pointed that out recently and said, you know, perhaps it is true. You know, I mean, people are complaining about the present leadership right now, and the truth is, we come to think of it, you know. These guys have been leading since they were in their early 30s, mid-30s, and so on. I'm not sure I think they're overrated, really. And you know, there seems to be a lot more in terms of leadership of a people than the command and control jackboot approach, do this and follow the instruction kind of idea, you know. That there's a lot more that you have to know and do. A lot more skills that you have to have, you know, emotional intelligence, you know, visioning, as I mentioned earlier on, to take a people forward, you know. I mean, we don't have writers amongst them, for example. There aren't many writers. Maybe as they talk about people like Maman Vatsa and co, you know, but
I used to read it. I used to read this poem when I was growing up.
Exactly.
Yes, my father used to buy me books written by Maman Vatsa.
Exactly. So right now, we have seen that what Nigeria needs now, we need philosopher kings, philosopher leaders. You've got to have a philosophy. Where do you want your people to go to? Are you a very good communicator? Can you convince people to a cause? Why do they say that leadership is the ability to take your followers to a predetermined, a predestined location, whether they like it or not? So how do you convince them that, hey, guys, this is where we need to go to? They're going to lampoon you. They're going to lambaste you. But you say, listen, this is where we're going. So that's leadership. Leadership is not about, you don't force them. You convince them and take them to that location. That means you must have a vision that's beyond the multitude, you know. So it's obvious. So I'm not sure I'm going to be running to town. I think having military in leadership is a misnomer. As a matter of fact, I always tell people, the other day I went to Kogi State Government House a long time ago, I think when I was still in banking, 03 or so. And you could see the pictures, like in every government house, you see the pictures of all the people that have ruled or governed Kogi State. And of course, there was a time they ran out of, there weren't enough generals to go around as state governors. There weren't enough colonels to go around. They begin to go down. Then you have to look for lieutenant colonels. Sometimes they couldn't find lieutenant colonels. They have to look for majors, all right, and equivalent across the other forces like that. Because, you know, there wasn't just enough well-trained people to govern the state. Imagine, so a major, where is a major going to take a state to, for example, you know, in terms of the experience? As a matter of fact, for you to lead a state with the complexities and all of that we have, you have to be at the general level. And I'm saying that even as a civilian, you have to think at the level of a general, someone who has seen a lot, who have managed human beings, who have seen battles and what have you.
Now, you know, while I was thinking about this, even prior to the Democracy Day, I think Monday night after the president also read the speech on Tuesday, you know what came to my mind? Fela. His song, Democracy, Demonstration of Grace. I'm sorry, I'm bringing a lot of music into the show today, but...
Fantastic. That's a new twist, a nice idea.
You know, Demonstration of Grace, the song that he sang close to 30 years ago.
Yeah,
or so.
perhaps more.
Yes, or more. How do you think, does that still reflect?
Oh, it's even right now. I mean, Fela will be throwing tantrums right now if he was still alive. You know, I mean, in those days they used to criticize him. Now we know that that's one prophet that was sent to this space. You know, and he saw things that people didn't see. I mean, right now we are even seeing more of the demonstration of madness. You know. Call it demo madness right now, you know, that we're seeing in our country. That, you know, democracy is meant to be a government as defined by Abraham Lincoln, a government of the people, by the people, for the people, right? Or whichever way you want to arrange it, you know. You now, if you look at the breakdown, is this government of the people? Doubtful. Is it by the people? It's by the politicians and those who have seized control of the levers of state. Is it for the people? Oh, certainly not for the people, because if it was for the people, we would not be having an increase in people who are extremely poor. We will not be having an increase in out-of-school children. We will not be having an increase in anger, in despair. People are less happy, and of course, one of the fulcrum of democracy is the pursuit of happiness. Good. Right. So it is doubtful whether we're actually practicing democracy or a government of people who, a few oligopolists and that kind of oligarchy that have kind of seized control of the country, and several variants of it. If it was democracy, we wouldn't be having a scenario where guys are in the National Assembly doing whatever they like, awarding themselves any amount of allowances that they like. I mean, I give this analogy. We saw just 2 weeks ago, congressmen in Washington, D.C., saying they can't even afford to rent a place in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, because it's expensive.
It's expensive, and because they actually have another house, they're paying mortgage. Look at that and think about the economic model that we're running, whereby, I mean, in the U.S., where the epicenter of capitalism, a congressman is saying to you that he's paying mortgage where he's living with his family, and he doesn't see why he has to pay rent here. He can't even afford to, and so he sleeps in his office. Right? And then you come to Nigeria. We are the same country that will go to the US to beg them for everything in the world, for aid, for weapons, for everything else. The US economy will swallow Nigeria's economy 100 times over, by every means, you know. And then you have a scenario where in Nigeria you become a congressman, a House of Rep member. What you are seeing is you're buying cars of 100 million for your wife and having some costume very I mean, like Femi is sweating right now. I saw him in one restaurant yesterday. He was looking very Femi Bajabi. I mean, like, a lot of his constituents are going after him, but that's even nothing. I mean, what about our brother Mr. Dino? You are flaunting all your Ferraris and Bugattis and all of that. Is that what we're talking about? You guys are paying yourselves some amounts of money that are not approved by government because you think you can. And of course, you have the scandal of the revelations by Okonjo-Iweala about them adding 17 billion to the budget, which is true. People like, whether anybody's trying to, it is true that is what our guys do. That's National Assembly. But we have the same problem down the judiciary and of course in the executive, you know. So what we have right now if Fela woke up today, would probably just collapse, you know.
Okay. That brings me to the question of, you know, in as much as we should celebrate 19 years of democracy, but for me, I think that conversation should be elevated to the fact that should we just limit ourselves to the issue of freedom of the citizens from military and exercising our powers to vote and be voted for, the existence of perhaps democratic institutions and all of that? How much economic freedom and economic prosperity has come with this democracy in 19 years and perhaps with this administration? Because I do know that what democracy affords people is also opportunities.
Absolutely.
Democracy comes with opportunities. Absolutely. At least that's my own reading of it. What do you think?
So I mean, in South Africa, you had this guy Malema had to form the Economic Freedom Movement, or what they call it, EFF, Frontier, whatever the case may be, you know, because at some point they realized that, look, it's not enough that the black majority rule is going on in South Africa now. But they realize that the economic aspect, and some people will even criticize Mandela for that look, he negotiated the political aspect, but he didn't negotiate the economic aspect, and the blacks were still being rammed down into poverty. You know, that's their own problem. Here in Nigeria, as the truth is that more and more, as we move along in this democracy, the space is closing in on the common man to express himself and to get opportunities. And you can see that what we have created in Nigeria is this stomach infrastructure kind of democracy, where in the year 2018, we're still seeing a scenario where 2,000 naira is enough to bribe somebody to mortgage the rest of their lives. As a matter of fact, if you convert that 2,000 naira into dollars, you probably realize that we're using less dollar to buy the future of our people than we used to 10, 15 years ago. That there's less respect for the people. And, you know, compared to even the military era, what you wouldn't find in the military era is a proliferation of positions. All right, a lot of positions created just to make some political guys happy. In Nigeria right now, we have about 540 parastatals. Half of them are doing nothing. They're just there.
I didn't know more. I thought they were up to 900.
No, it's about 540 the last time I checked, because I worked on some of the Oronsai committee report and so on. So half of them are useless. They are created for political reasons. So you'd wonder. Now, the point is also that, mind you, in all of those parastatals I mentioned, they are top heavy. Nigeria's civil service is small. Yes, it's shocking. It's shockingly small. Yeah. It is toxic and it is top heavy. In one of the main parastatals, 89% of the staff are senior staff. You can't believe it. And that's one of the ones that pay the highest. 89% of them are senior staff. Only 11% are junior staff. So like somebody said, there are a lot of chiefs and very few Indians, you know, to serve the chiefs, you know. So, I mean, so that's the kind of scenario we have. We have to go beyond the rhetoric, you know, now, all that rhetoric of the rituals of democracy to the dividends
right
of
now
democracy.
Is, how can we make our democracy work? What is the measurement of a working and a thriving democracy?
The measurements are those things that you mentioned: pursuit of happiness. Opportunities, a better standard of living. That is why you say people should rule and lead themselves. I was reading something, written by Confucius recently. And he mentioned, that, what you have to do to give people, first of all, you feed the people, you give them the independence to be able, and at a point you give them the independence to be able to lead themselves by interacting with themselves and coming out with the best strategies for them to move forward themselves. And that's what it is. I mean, I'm talking about Confucius eons ago when he wrote this thing. And so if we're saying that Nigeria's democracy today has not afforded our people the those opportunities that they require, has not afforded them the pursuit of happiness, and their living, the standard of living is dropping. 84 million people, 84 million Nigerians are today living in abject and poverty. Number one, and that one you see it in worldpoverty.io. Yeah. And we overtook India on the 17th of January of this year. We overtook it. India is now 79 million.
Yes,
if you check.
Yes, I know. I talk about. In fact, I did a series on that report when it was released last year.
Absolutely.
And I raised the alarm. I did a 1-week show on poverty, and I alerted our authorities that this is a report that has been released as at September last year, that by February of this year, that Nigeria would overtake India with being the world's poorest. And now we are the world's poorest people. Now that brings me to the question of our GDP growth, because let's link it. We've seen, now I was able to collate GDP growth from 2014 to 2018. If we have that, let's put it on the screen. And from 2014, we saw that we grew. Of course, we're growing in 2014, 6%, 6% to 5% in the last quarter of 2014, to where we are right now, 1.95%. Now, the question is, our growth rate, one would say there's no inclusiveness in our growth rate. Should it be about inclusiveness, or we are not growing sufficiently?
It's both.
Isn't it? Because we are growing, at least those are the numbers on the screen for you. There was a time we were growing about 6%, but a lot of analysts have said, and even reports I've read even in the past 5-6 years ago, that Nigeria needs to grow at even double digits to be able to create impact. We've not grown at a double digit, at least since the time that I know. Now our growth is at 1.95%. So is it about inclusiveness, or is not sufficient growth? I read also a report, Center for Global Development, in April 2018, and they did say that 72% to 91% of Nigerians, I repeat, 72% to 91% of Nigerians will spend their entire lives in poverty.
Absolutely.
While the poor will continue to be poor and expected to escape that poverty when they are 85.46 years. So as a poor person now in Nigeria, you're expected to still be poor till you're about 85. That is if you live long to 85. If you don't live long to 85, you die, definitely you've lived in extreme poverty. What the report said, Center for Global Development, is 72 to 91% of Nigerians will live their entire lives in poverty.
Absolutely. That's the way it is. So I was going to say before you put up the slide that, you know, like I was going to mention not only the poverty index, but also my realization of in recent times that in Nigeria today, shanty towns and slums are expanding at a very rapid rate everywhere, even in Abuja here where we stay, you know, like because there's been no plan to house the lowest income earner. When they say they want to do low income housing estates.
Okay, let me hold you at that point. Okay. Let's quickly take a break. When we come back, Tope Fashua will still be speaking to me about, you know, the dividends of democracy. I don't even like that phrase, but what can I say? It's popular. Let's quickly take a break. We'll be right back. This is your preferred destination for business, finance, economy, market and investment.
Of course, there are very painful adjustments and painful decisions to be made. I'm very confident that if we carry on the course that we're currently pursuing, Nigeria will be in a much stronger position economically.
Nancy, we will be professional. Nancy, we will be apolitical. Nancy, we will not go into politics. What we will do is to focus on our banking business, but use our skills to support the efforts of government in creating jobs for people, to support economic growth and development for the country.
The only way the narrative can change is if the citizens elect leaders who have the vision, who have the worldview, who have the competence to take them to a different place.
Thank you for having me, Nancy, and well done for a very good job.
You're the best and you know it. Yeah.
Welcome back. Tope Fashua, the Chief Exec at Global Analytics, is still joining me right here. We're still talking about the growth without inclusiveness, and perhaps the growth is not sufficient.
So I was saying, first of all, that we look at our housing sector and, you know, the fact that we have never planned for the very low income earners. For example, I mean, those guys who live in all these slums, people who live in villages. There's no point in Nigeria history that any government have said, oh, look, these are our villages, we need rural renewal. What do we do for them? You know, and part of my own political, if you like, philosophies right now, and my thinking now is that this federal allocation thing that they do, the federal government doesn't need more than 25%.
In fact, the states are calling for a review.
Now, mind you, the state governors, they would probably want to take everything, but they have also shown they're despots, right? So I would actually say they shouldn't take more than 35%, but that 40%, which is the larger chunk, should go to the local government. To be administered, because at that level, if you are not careful, you will get the quality people who can envision and use this money properly. So that money may be administered by a joint committee or some sort of arrangement, right, of the local government, the state government, and the federal government sitting together, because the real development for this country is actually at the local government level. So at no point have we planned that, look, can we build one bedroom houses or room and parlor that are, you know, for these people? Now, number one, this thing it may not be profitable. In fact, it's not something that the private sector will go into, because you can't see the profit in that, and you don't expect the private sector to go and throw away
it's about
money.
Social inclusiveness.
Social inclusiveness, yes, that dividend of democracy. So in terms of inclusiveness and the size of the growth, we're not doing well on both. Now, so a lot of that growth, a lot of this, 1.9% growth right now is fueled by the oil and gas sector. Simple. Oil and gas is suddenly selling at a higher price than we thought. And, you know, the government is also going back to relax. And then, you know, and of course, there's a lot of borrowing in that as well. We are powering that with a lot of leveraging.
Nigeria's debt is about 21 trillion now.
Amazing that we have increased that debt by about 9 trillion in less than 3 years.
Okay,
you know, so
okay, just quickly, before we end the
crazy.
show, I want us to also link the HDI, which is the Human Development Index. Of course, that was postulated or brought out, I think, by a Pakistani economist. He said, what the Human Development Index is about measurement of to be and to do, succinctly, in terms of being well-fed, being sheltered, being well-educated, and all of that. If you take a look at how Nigeria is doing, 152 out of 188. Countries like Ghana, Zambia, Gabon, Equatorial Guinea are ahead of us. You know, okay, that's it. I was also able to put that on.
Yeah.
How do you think we can do that very quickly?
It's amazing. I mean, I probably have said and I've written as well that the Nigerian government should concentrate more on HDI than this idea of GDP growth. But it seems like there's a global idea among those people who run economies around the world that they would rather be sticking to the GDP. However, in sticking to that GDP, we're performing woefully even on GDP, which is a very not so meaningful index. When you talk of HDI, Libya is actually the best in Africa until they destroyed the place. Even now that they've destroyed the place, you see that they are still deporting our people. So, look, Nigerian leaders are mindless people. I'm sorry to say. It's the mindless level of mismanagement and misgovernance is totally inexcusable. So I would say, Nancy, that let me tell you my thinking for Nigeria. Nigeria should be growing at 20% per annum. Minimum 15%. Are you listening to what I'm saying, Nancy?
Yes, I am.
15 to 20% GDP growth per annum is what you should be targeting.
That's what I said.
That is going to drive inflation a bit. By the time we're pressing people to work, okay, a lot of our youth that are unemployed, there are job opportunities for them. By the time you press them to work, this GDP will grow.
Okay,
you know, and of course you drive inflation, but you'd have created a new set of spenders, a new class of spenders who are the ones that are going to buy local and do all of those things. That's what we should be doing.